use the little tools that like fewer people are using, because it's going to be a lot easier to get like a meaningful airdrop from that. My point is 95% of the people on Camino use the lend and the borrow thing. Okay, cool. The long and the short tool on season 1 paid out way more because nobody's using it.
GM everybody, welcome to Flywheel, your number one source for everything crypto, DeFi, and all that's in between. If you want to know what's going on in the world on chain, well, you come to the right place. This is DeFi Dave, and I'm here to help you harness the power of the Flywheel. And this week we have returning on the show, Monkey Rothschild's Monkey Charts on Twitter. He was on a show a year ago. We all know the markets and everything looked a lot different then. And we have him on today. I take this one solo. We talk about everything from Memecoins to airdrops. We actually rate airdrops and we get into it. Meme Monkey's been a friend of mine for a bit. And so it's great to have him back on to chop it up. And I think y'all are going to enjoy this one. But before we get into it, make sure you go ahead, subscribe right now, give us a like, let us know what you think in the comments below. If you're on our socials, make sure you follow us on Twitter, TikTok, and Telegram at Flywheel DeFi. Go to flywheeldefi.com and subscribe for all the latest updates. And if you want to follow me on Twitter, I'm at DeFiDave22. And let's get the flywheel spinning. Flywheel. I'm your host, DeFi Dave, here solo dolo this time. But this time around, we have back on for the second time, Monkey Rothschild. Monkey was last on a year ago. He's a trader. He's a creator. He does all kinds of things. And we're going to be getting into his thoughts, what's going on with Wossies. And so we'll get it started. But Monkey, how are you doing this fine morning?
Dude, I'm good. Appreciate you waking up early. Sun's up. Markets are flat, which, hey, is a win. We're good.
Yeah, people are, after like the past few months of up only for certain coins, and now it's been kind of flat. It's like, all right, we had one leg up, time to like chill out for a sec. No one get too crazy. But since you were on a year ago, a lot has changed. There have been a lot of surprises, maybe some expected things like the Bitcoin ETF, not so expected things like meme coins and the airdrop meta. What are your thoughts on all these different changes? Anything that surprised you? And yeah, I'll let you take it.
Yeah, I think like one thing I think that surprised me, and maybe it surprised some other people, is just how it really became like a picker's market. Like your P&L this year really, really, really depends on like kind of what you're into.
What do you mean by picker's market?
I just mean that like it seems like in the past, and I don't really have data to support this, but markets used to kind of all run together. But now it's like, okay, we've got a great Solana run and ETH is just flat, Yeah. And like we kind of saw we saw ETH and then a lot of other coins top, what was it, like March? And then, certain parts of the market just kept running. And so like that's been interesting to me. Obviously like ETH BTC has been bleeding out for a while, which I think is like probably breeding some opportunity, but it's just been interesting with like the ETF and all that. Those flows have obviously been like paramount to the whole thing.
Wait, do you not think it was a picker's market before 4 years ago? I feel like 4 years ago, maybe things went more up in unison, but like at different times, like you had like BNB cycle, AVAX cycle, Ohm cycle. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think it was, but maybe it just feels like certain parts of this market are just super dead, and where like other parts can be ripping, others are just like really, really flat. But I don't know, maybe this is just like anecdotal type stuff.
No, I would have to agree with you, and I think a lot of other people would agree with you. And do you think the reason behind this is because like the big wave of retail, I wouldn't even call it retail because we're all retail, but new participants and new money isn't here yet. So it's still a lot of that old money cycling from last cycle, and there's only so much liquidity, and all the liquidity and capital and mind share decided, hey, like we're going to go to Solana, and hey, we're going to go to BTC.
Yeah, I think it's that. And then I think also if you look at like previous cycles, everybody had their money on centralized exchanges. So it's a lot easier for everything on FTX to kind of like move in tandem. But now it just feels like liquidity is more fragmented. You know, you've obviously got the bulk of liquidity on ETH. You've got like the quick liquidity on Solana. It just feels different that way.
It does feel different. Like, how does this cycle feel different to you than last cycle?
I think like the biggest thing, and you see so many people writing about it, is just like the VC hate. And it's like, it's not really VC hate, but it's just like people avoiding these coins where everybody knows there's seed investors that are in way lower. It feels like the FTX thing really bred like a FU kind of like to these large players. And so people, I think, are looking at meme coins and they're like, okay, this is nothing. It's worth zero, but it's like a fair game. And that's kind of all they want. And so like, they're like, okay, if this goes to zero, it's at least like other degens who dumped on me, not, 3AC for the 50th time this month. So I think that has like a part of the way the market's moving. But yeah.
Yeah. And it's not like VC hate didn't exist before. It always was hated. Like they always were kind of rub people the wrong way, especially post ICO era when, it was just them getting early into rounds. And that's just the way regulation like ended up being and all that. But it's interesting to see now, like this is like the people's FU to the VCs, like going into these meme coins and they're like, yes, it's vaporwave. Like it's kind of like a political statement in a way. It's like, yes, like your shit's vaporwave, so is my shit. But like, at least like we have the honesty to admit that it's vaporwave.
100%. Yeah. And it's interesting. And like, I think for a second, you kind of saw it leak over into like traditional markets with that one Trump stock. Like I didn't really watch that very close, but like, clearly
True Social.
Yeah, clearly people were buying that, not for like the traditional reason you buy a stock. So like, I think markets are changing and like people want more access to markets and they're kind of like speaking through markets. And like, look, GME was like kind of what started that. That was the original FU.
Well, my thesis, if you even take away like the VC hate aside, but why I think meme coins are popping off are kind of simpler. It's attention, like money. Attention equals money. Attention equals value. And like we saw this, Web 2, like ad money, basically. That's like your attention equals value. But now with crypto and blockchain, you have value moving at the speed of light. And because of that, it's going to go to where there's the most attention. And that's why the most outrage coins, no matter what you think of them, because they're generating attention and outrage and emotion, that's why for like, whether it's for like a quick second or even longer, that's why those coins are going up. So it's in my opinion, it's a combination of the VC hate and also like, this is like the true like proliferation of attention equals value, like quite simple.
Yeah. And I think like, it's different completely, but we're also seeing like Twitter kind of evolve the same way where it's just like the whole like paid engagement thing has really just like, it's always been the case, but that's just like really shed light on it where like you see people literally just post anything for attention. It's like, it's a game. I get it.
Yeah.
But it's really, it's the same thing.
Yeah. Before I get into that and fantasy top, because that just popped in my head, like one thing last thing I want to say about meme coins is they're not as fair of launch as people think. And I say that because if someone, I had a friend recently who's been like, slinging pumped out fun coins and they've all been going to radium and blowing up. But now bots are paying attention to his address. So whenever he launches something, bots on it right away. And those bots basically for all these different launches are your like VC pre-mine, quote unquote. So it's not really as fair as people think. And like they just replace the hierarchy instead of like VCs, it's these people that run bots.
No, 100%. Yeah. And I think like, but that also that kind of like entropy and the way like the good ones are born, that's kind of the fun in it and the game. But you're definitely right. Like most of them, not all of them are fair would be the way to put it. And like, before you buy, I think the most important thing you can do is just like a little looking into the holders and like maybe the large sellers and
Yeah. What's some like meme coin sanitation that people can do before they ape?
I think like it just depends on like the life cycle, but For me, like I think you just look at like the communities that won't quit. Like there's been some of these meme coins that are still under like 20 million that have been around for like months, and the communities are insane. So like there's like long-term research like that. You literally just look for like super, super dedicated holders, I think. But on like the short term, if you're like trying to snipe and get things, you know, in the first day or whatever, it's tougher. I'm definitely not an expert, but I think you just have to go back to like making sure someone's not holding like 10%. I think like the post dev Jeet is like kind of the standard as far as like that's generally a good entry, is like if you've got a pretty good community and the dev just terrorizes the chart, that's probably a good time.
Like Dogecoin is the OG at that, lifted that, all that.
Yeah.
But back when I was, you mentioned people tweeting for engagement because they're literally getting paid Elon bucks. Now you have Fancy Top, which has really taken off. And it's funny seeing how that changes the dynamics of Twitter interactions, where people are like, hey, tweet more, I have money on you, or like, hey, I'm going to mute you because I don't want to like up your views and engagement. What are your thoughts on things like Fancy Top? Have you like used it at all, tried it? Do you have a card or anything?
So no, I haven't really used it much. It's just been one of those things. I think like overall, something in the long run like this will do well. I think it's tough though, because it's, you know, it's just like, it's very similar to like, you know, starting like a good perpetuals exchange or anything. Is like, you really need like a critical mass to make it work. And I think like early on, it can be tough to tell whether that critical mass is going to come or not. Like you can get the CT critical mass pretty quick, but as far as like breaking out of our bubble, that's the thing that like, I think it will happen. I just don't know to which project or when.
Yeah.
But like overall, the SocialFi stuff, it's interesting to me. I haven't been as deep as many people, but like there's something there. And like in the end, people want to engage with like creators they like and they want to bet on it. So like there's a product market fit. I don't know, you know, it's just one of those things where like, I don't love like asking people to buy something that like represents, this is not really my vibe. Then like I work for you. Like I've made it a point in my life not to work for people. Like, I don't really want to like work for you now. Overall it's like, it's cool, but I'm a little bit blissfully ignorant probably.
Yeah. The Fi part of SocialFi really changes all the social interactions, because before without a financial element, you're just talking to people. There's something deeper there, or, you know, it's different. But once there's a transaction element and it's all about money, you know, as Charlie Munger said, show me an incentive, I'll show you an outcome. It changes it completely. And it kind of like, you know, in a sense, like taints it, you know? So
yeah, it definitely changes it. And like, I think there's ways it can come out the other side good and like, you know, feel like authentic and stuff. I don't know if I've necessarily like seen it or felt it, but that's not to say like I'm bearish or I think there's anything wrong with it. It's just a really, really, really unique one. And like, I think we're just really early on. I mean, like if you look at like, it's just, it's going to take a while to like kind of, you know, develop. And I think, and this is the first time I've thought of it, but like, look at something like Cameo. You could argue there's like actually some sort of like similarities where people are paying for celebrities just a short amount of their attention. It's very different, but that's like $1 billion app. So clearly there's demand for like similar stuff.
And have you seen this thing with live streamers and their tokens? It's funny because not too long ago, I was talking to the Unlonely people, and the Unlonely people have been doing this for a minute. Like having tokens on, you know what Unlonely is?
I don't.
So it's a live streaming platform, but you can't create it, like film, people that film and live streamers can like launch a token on a bonding curve on it. It's really cool. And like people can, let's say there's a dating show and there's like a bonding curve on it. People can like basically buy this Vibe token and it goes up and down if they like the person that's being like a guest or not. I don't like it has all
so
these,
it's just like interaction through a token.
It's interactive. Yeah. So you have that, which is a combination of Memecoin, SocialFi, but like all this interactive experience. But now you've been seeing like, I was like, oh, this is definitely going to take off. And not even a week later, you see like the most degenerate coins imaginable launch on Kick as like pumped out fun coins. I'm not sure if you've seen these things.
I won't even get into like the one.
Yeah, we won't even say what they are because they are vile. They're like I said, attention. Attention is everything. Attention brings value, no matter how much attention and outrage it brings. But like, what are your thoughts on those? Like, how do you see these evolving?
I don't know. I mean, I think like it's definitely an interesting concept. I think like, I have to recognize I'm not the target audience on a lot of this, like I got into
really
crypto
the lowest common denominator. No,
I got into crypto I didn't like the dollar. Like, I'm kind of like a finance minded person. So I have to recognize like I'm not the target audience. But what I would say is like, look at all the money like donated to Twitch streamers, stuff like this. Like you're telling me if you gamify that, you give people a little chance to get maybe money back and like the streamers making a fee. How is it not a hit? You know what I mean? Like there's already so much money flying around these areas where like if you gamify it a bit and add some incentives, to me, it's like, yeah, makes sense.
Yeah, and that seems the direction that SocialFi is going. It's really like GameFi, but with people.
Yeah, no, exactly. And like, I think there's certain type of creators that are going to gravitate towards it and then certain that'll like stay away from it. But, I think it'll just take people time to like figure it out. And for some people, I think it'll be huge. Yeah. But I'm not sure if we're going to get like Taylor Swift on these like anytime soon or the equivalents.
Taylor Swift, I'm not sure if we'll get like a Kendrick Drake beef on these things.
Yeah, Ment's the NFT of the diss track, and whoever mints more wins.
Yeah, why don't they come out with music NFTs? I mean, they're missing a huge opportunity here.
Why hasn't anyone thought of this?
I know. I don't know. This I was also thinking about with this cycle, if you look 4 years ago at this time around the Bitcoin halving, everything was so dead. Like it's if you take a step back and you look, it's kind of similar to now where it's just like the same group of participants, I'll bet a lot smaller 4 years ago, but nothing was really going on. It's just like money, like switching hands. Maybe there's like a few random, pumps on centralized exchanges of random coins. But if you think about it, there's just so much more capital now than there was before. And it's being sloshed around the same way, but it's just, instead of being on centralized exchanges, it's like in Solana meme coins or whatnot. Like, what are your thoughts on that? It's just like, we're actually like basically what my argument is, we're on track the same way as we were last cycle.
Yeah, it feels like it with like a few key differences. I mean, like one would just be like the Bitcoin bid, like that's an outlier. But yeah, like kind of going back to what you said about like a few isolated things here and there or whatever, like I think FrxETH in the bear market was like a great example of just capturing attention and like hot ball of money theory or whatever. I think it was like CMS who came up with that one.
One second.
A few moments later.
Awesome. Yeah, what I was saying is I think FrxETH in the bear market was just like a great example of if you can capture attention and like grab that hot ball of money. That's like a really good example of what you were saying of kind of the same money flowing around. But then, we have BTC flows, which are like very much new money, external money. And then I think like there is definitely some retail obviously buying these meme coins. And I think like, it's not like a super original thought, but you kind of just have like these environments where, interest rates are at 8%, nobody can buy a house, people are making less and less money adjusted. And it's just kind of like a gambler's market. And I think that's just societal right now.
Yeah. It's funny. Like for so long, we lived in a low interest rate environment, like probably for like 15 years of our lives, like probably from when me and you were both in like middle school or high school until very recently, it was low interest rates. And that's all we knew. And now seeing like a high interest rate environment and seeing a bit more struggle out there, I guess like, what are your thoughts on like seeing with your own eyes, kind of like the differences between a low interest rate environment and high interest rate environment and how it's affecting the market?
Yeah, it's interesting. Like I did some stuff in real estate for a short amount of time. And one thing I learned there beyond any shadow of a doubt is that people buy off payment. It has nothing to do with like the price of the house. It's just not in factor. It's like, okay, I can get approved for this much. I can pay this much a month. So interest rates are like just wildly important to like housing, auto, all that. And I think like, as far as what feels different now, it's interesting. Like I'm a little bit isolated. Obviously, like my daily needs are met and I'm not like super social, but it feels like there's a general sense of defeat amongst a lot of people. And then there's also a sense of like hyper gambling to make it amongst like a separate crowd. And it's like people have kind of either accepted average or are really, really, really on like a driven path to find alpha and like, and profit from it. So I don't know, you know, it's tough to like say how it feels different, but
Yeah.
it just feels like the water's rising a little bit. And then I think like, you know, we've all, on the case of like national debt or things like that, we've all been hearing, oh, you know, US national debt is so high. We've been hearing this for so long. Inflation, we've been hearing about it for so long. But you start to look at it now and, you know, our annual interest payments at the current interest rates are like 1.2 trillion. If we raise any more, I think like 150 basis points, they go up to 1.7 trillion. Total debt's like 33 trillion. So you know, it's a couple percent compounding a year. You know, that would tell me we're probably not going to raise them too much. And so it does feel a little bit sketchy to me, just the whole thing. And I think like there's this complacency that you can get lulled into in a situation like this. All that's a little half-baked, but.
Would you consider yourself in America doomer, like Balaji, or like do you have more hope? Because I know I feel like every time I listen to Balaji, like the world's gonna end. I'm just like, I don't like listening to this. Like I'm a little bit more optimistic as a person, but like, do you like buy into what he's saying or not so much?
I don't think I'm like a doomer. Like I'm certainly not rooting for it. Like, you know, you could offer me like a whole bunch of money and like I wouldn't want, you know, like kind of the core society of the world to collapse just because it's not going to be fun for anyone. God forbid it happened. So no, I don't think I'm a doomer, but I think that like, I mean, you know, I'm of the thought it's pretty simple, but it is oddly rare nowadays. It's like you can't create or destroy value. That's kind of the thing God does.
It's like thermodynamics. Like you cannot create energy. Yeah. And
so like, I just think like, look, all this financial alchemy and stuff that we've been innovating over the last, you know, couple decades, like eventually there's going to be some outcome. And like, I don't think it means it's the end of the world or whatever, but I think you look at like Japan and they're a step ahead of us or a step two ahead of us. And I think like something like that could potentially be expected.
And they're still going along.
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting, like watching them and their currency developments recently and stuff. And like, I'm not that versed on Japan, but I would say like in my very layman's terms, they're kind of like one step further than us on like the experimental stuff they do. And it seems like they're starting to have problems.
I think it comes down to this. As a society for decades, we've accepted GDP as the measurement of progress and like growth for the sake of growth. And we just decided like that matters beyond anything else more than a shadow of a doubt. And we just decided like that's like the best objective. It's not perfect. I feel like no one agrees that it's perfect, but it's the best objective way to measure. And like it has its faults. But if you measure like, you know, GDP with like all these countries that are stagnating or that are like slowing in population growth, it doesn't look good. But if you look at their societies, like you've been to Japan, we've been to Japan, like it's still going. There's still like life still happens. People are still going about their days and, you know, and whatnot. So I wonder if in the future there'll be a new measurement that takes into account, you know, like the post-industrial, like technological digital society that we're entering. But I did something else I've like pondered about.
Yeah. And like similar thought. I think I heard, who was it? Larry Fink, Ray Dalio, one of the two, talking recently about how like population decline has been very, very long associated with like a declining economy, all that, but kind of with tech advances, with AI, that doesn't necessarily need to be the case. And I thought that was really interesting. And I think it's like a similar line of thought with kind of what you're saying is like, what fundamental inputs are changing that could affect kind of like the output that we're expecting.
Yeah. And like with every leap in technological progress, less is always more, and more wealth is created from it. But it's hard for people to accept that because they just think the world is ending. Like that's why I feel like AI doomerism is kind of overblown, because I think if you just view AI as, well, maybe this is a very simple just breaking down. If you view AI as like a calculator that helps you get things done, instead of like, oh, this thing's going to replace human intelligence. And if you view it as a tool instead of like something that's dangerous, then it's like, oh, wow, this can actually help us a lot.
Yeah, I'd say like the people who think AI is like, oh, we're going to like flip a switch and AI is just going to like take jobs. They're like probably the same people who think you can just like hire people to build a company and tell them what to do. And like, they're just going to do it and the company is going to grow. It just does not work that way. Like there's a reason you need like a good manager, and it's because things change. People like are not constant. Businesses are not easy. And so my point is like AI is just like a good employee. Even the best employee, though, it needs a manager, it needs a leader. And so like it'll fundamentally change the way things work, but I don't think it's as nuclear as the doomers probably do.
No, not at all. I want to, rein this conversation a bit more back to crypto. And I want to talk about something else that may have caught people off guard. It caught me off guard because I thought this meta was going to be over, but airdrops, airdrops have really become the go-to marketing tool for projects. And it's interesting seeing this dynamic, especially between like heavily funded coins where like things aren't exactly so clear with points, who's farming who's sibling who. There's a lot to talk about and break down here, and I have like a whole section like carved out for this. So what are your thoughts on the current airdrop meta? I think like airdrops have like existed forever, but like this really started with Jitto, and like since then, well, actually it started with, if you think about it, there's two parts. There's points with like Blur and Frentech, and then you had the actual airdrop with Jitto. So like, what are your thoughts on these like two metas? Because they're like obviously like one and the same.
Yeah, I think like there's kind of two pieces to it. And like one is that most of these applications are like a winner takes all type thing. Like that's just the way like liquidity works, marketplaces work. I use Uber because there's the most drivers. And so like because of that, airdrop farming and stuff like that, I think if it's designed right, is legitimate. And like basically it's a vampire attack on whatever else. Like you're going to incentivize the early users to come play in our arena. And those incentives theoretically should kind of like drop off over time, but where everybody should be left is still better than where they came from. So I think it's super legitimate that way. And I think like all of crypto is a vampire attack, and it's all kind of like based off the same thing as an airdrop. Like it's all like, okay, we use Aave because, fuck Bank of America. Why should they take 90% of the spread or 95 or whatever it is? And so I think that like airdrops are legit because of that. But then kind of going to the second part of the question, as far as like, very like obscure point systems and all sorts of things like that, I think like users need to realize more often than not, they're taking, pretty good risk, market risk in some ways or smart contract risk or whatever. And so I think that like there was a wave of like airdrops are super free money. Oh my gosh. I think we're kind of sobering up now. And I think that to kind of like wrap up this whole spiel, I think like people are going to get a little more picky. They're going to demand a little more information. And I think rightfully so, because liquidity is valuable and like people are going to start to kind of like, I think, demand more. But I also think one last thing is like the Jupiters of the world, the ones who are kind of like spreading it out and I think being really thoughtful with it. I think it's a great way to kind of like take market share. Yeah.
But how's Jupiter doing their airdrop exactly?
So it's over. So like it's annual. So it's like once a year. It's in January. I think it's like 3 or 4 years. And then there's incentives to like stake it and vote. And they've got like 250,000 wallets voting, on like every proposal, which I think is really cool.
Oh, wow.
They've done the LFG Launchpad in a way where like Jupe holders will vote on which tokens launch on Jupiter, and then the launch fee goes to all the voters. So they've really kind of like vertically integrated some cool stuff. And like kind of the Jupe swap feature is just kind of like what brings everyone together. I think it's really interesting the way they designed it. I've long been a fan, so I might be a bit biased, but yeah.
No, for sure. And I remember hearing on an earlier podcast how Jupiter DAO participation is much higher than ETH DAO participation, and things just happen differently there, and they engage people differently there. They actually make the meetings fun. It seems like there's an airdrop component to it, so it's interesting how they're incentivizing governance in a way, in a really cool way that I feel like ETH DAO people can learn from.
Yeah, and I think like, look, if you kind of like look at what Jupiter wants to do, like they want to just be like a hub of liquidity. Like you can come here, you can trade stocks, trade whatever. And I think in order to do that, you need power in numbers. Like if we just look at some of these DAOs where like we've just seen the most shady things with governance, and we've just never seen anything really profound or anything even I would say like mildly successful come out of like real governance and DAOs. And so I think like they kind of reimagined it. They're heavier on incentives than most DAOs. Like that is, you know, to cut to the chase, like the biggest difference, right? Like you're getting incentivized to vote. That's a huge difference than most. But, you know, it's one of those things where I don't think the previous model really worked. So I'm a fan of them trying new stuff.
Yeah. And before I get more into airdrops, something that Jupiter has that other dexes on ETH and whatnot don't have is a DCA option. And this is the most I think people that build dexes really miss the boat on this, because DCAing is such a core like strategy of like any, if not just like experienced trader, but any casual trader. Like the best strategy for someone who's passively involved is just to DCA once a week. And they have that option. And I'm surprised that I'm not sure if it's like something technical. I feel like it is something technical on ETH because it's like a lot harder to do it. But like, what are your thoughts on the DCA option that Jupiter has and how it's like played into them gaining in popularity?
Yeah, I love it. And like, I don't know for a fact. I would imagine fees just have something to do with it, like as to why it's not popular on ETH. But yeah, I mean, Jupe has created just an insane on-chain tool. I mean, limit orders, DCA. They even have like DCA with a cutoff. So you can say, okay, you know, I want to quit buying, you know, after this price. I think, you know, Jupiter is just one of the best tools I've used probably ever. Hyperliquid is something that's up there as well. But yeah, I mean, good on-chain tools are just pretty rare. And I think Jupiter and
product market fit, real product market fit, not just pitch market fit.
Yeah, no, 100%. And look at Jupiter. I think the numbers speak for itself. So it was already a great product. You throw in like the cool DAO angle, just makes me a fan.
Yeah. And now for this next segment, I'm going to like name 4 or 5 airdrops, and I want you to rank them from 1 to 10. And then we can get into the reasons why behind it after this segment. So I'm going to go, this is the first one. Uniswap airdrop, 1 to 10.
I think like Uniswap, you got to give it like a 9 or a 10, just because it was like the whole meta. It was the first one, and
it was the first one, yeah.
Yeah, they blazed the trail. I remember the utter confusion of the day. Just like, what the hell is this? Somebody just gave me free money. So you got to go 10 there, I think.
Yeah, and actually, I was just getting to the story now. Where were you when the Uniswap airdrop happened? What was your initial reaction? And what were your thoughts on airdrops after it?
So I must have just been at home or something. I don't really remember that much, but at first I thought it was just like definitely a fad, and it just did not seem, I mid-curved it, you know, just to be like perfectly honest. It just did not seem like sustainable or whatever. But then I think like over time I started to say like, oh, okay, like the regulatory side makes this make sense. Like incentives now add up, right? Where I'm just a very game theory guy, and like somebody hands you money, you get a little skeptical. But then like once I started to think about like, okay, like regulatory incentives as far as like, you know, the things we talked about, like, you know, kind of vampire attacking, gaining users, then I understood it like in pretty short
Yeah.
order. But the first 24 hours were kind of just like skepticism and confusion, probably.
And if you remember, they did it because of Sushi, because Sushi vampire attacked them by having this massive liquidity farm and then just siphoning more than half their capital. And it seemed like a do or die moment. It seemed like an existential. Sushi was, for a time, especially then, was an existential threat to Uniswap's survival. So they were forced to do this, even like regulatory wise, like saying, oh, should we do this or not? Like, no, they just like airdrop to everyone. And I'll never forget, because I was in the middle of one of my cross country road trips during COVID, like early on. I was in the middle of Utah, and I remember like I went home to my Airbnb, and I just saw on Twitter like, hey, Uni. I'm like, what is going on? And then I like checked my wallets. I'm like, oh my God, like, wait, did we just get like free Uni tokens? It was just such a nice surprise. And probably the best feeling I had from that was I had one hometown friend that I onboarded into crypto and to do DeFi summer things. And a lot of my friends ignored me. This one friend didn't. Shout out Dan and Dan's detailing. And he got the Uni airdrop. And that made me feel so good that something like I helped someone like onboard into and try, and then he got rewarded for it. Like, I think that's just the coolest thing. And like, it's those like aha moments that really get people into crypto. It's like, wait, this can actually happen.
No, exactly. And like, it's all about aligning incentives, and like, that's why there is legitimacy to airdrops. But yeah, no, I mean, like, I've had a few similar situations where you're able to like set up somebody, and we don't know what's going to happen, but eventually it works out, and it's just the most beautiful thing. Like,
it is beautiful,
especially when it's just like a super meaningful amount of money to someone. There's nothing better.
Yeah. Next airdrop I have is, what did you think of the Arbitrum airdrop?
Arbitrum airdrop, like, it was one of those things where I wasn't like super focused on it or whatever. It was good, but I think like, and I'm one of these people where like, I have really strong opinions on some things, and then some things I'll just tell you I'm not super informed, and Arbitrum would be under that. But what I would say is like L2s are just tough. They hold very little of my interest. I think like, if you sybiled it, you did really well. But I just don't really see like a compelling reason to like, one, dive deep into the Arbitrum ecosystem, or like two, really hold the token. Again, I'm not saying I'm bearish or anything, nothing against Arbitrum. The same would be said for like most similar things. But I don't think that I'll give it like a 6 maybe. And that's kind of just a random number. But I think like my one reason it's low is that there was no like stickiness. Like, it kind of just felt like the word like pump and dump doesn't make sense, but it's just like a farm and dump. Like, okay. And then we just moved on. And so I think you look at something like Jupiter and you say, that's like the big difference, where it's
a flash in a pan compared to like spread out over time. Got it. It's I see what you're saying. I thought they dangled the carrot for a good amount of time, not too long, but like not too quick. But I agree with you that maybe they just did it all at once too fast. And I think other projects learned from it, and they're like, hey, let's spread it out over time.
Yeah, no, 100%.
Yeah. Next one, Athena. What are your thoughts on the Athena airdrop?
So Athena's cool. Like, I think the product's super cool. As far as like the airdrop goes, seemed like it went pretty well. Milady holders, I thought that was like a cool little like random thing. I don't know how they picked that. It was like Miladies and schizo posters.
They schizo posters and Remilios, and then they added Miladies because they're like, what the fuck? You're not getting the OG Remilio NFT.
Yeah, that's the one group you just don't mess with. I don't know how they thought they were going to cut out the Miladies. But I think it was cool. And like the one thing that like stuck out to me on that one is that it was just like a per wallet thing as far as holding the NFTs. I think that's like pretty cool in principle, but I think eventually people are just going to start to game it, split up their NFTs. So like overall, airdrop wise, I wasn't like super into it. It seems like they did pretty well. The NFT thing that they did, I thought like, I don't know how many tokens they gave them, but they got a lot of publicity for it. So I think that was a good move on their part. And then I think the product is cool. Like, it's a really, really interesting product. I like have spent a lot of time like kind of looking at cash and carry type trades and stuff like that. So it's really, really interesting to me. But it'll kind of be interesting to see how big it can grow, because there's definitely like a limiting factor as far as like, you need a certain amount of apes in the market to kind of like sustain something like that. So Airdrop, I think like 7 or 8, it seemed like they did pretty well. And product is like really interesting to me too. So
I think I'd actually give it a bit higher. I think I would give it like a 9 in terms of execution all around, because they had a points program, but the points program wasn't too long. It didn't drag people out. And then when they had their airdrop, it kind of forced the hand of a lot of other projects. Oh God, we got to airdrop now too. And I think they like played the perfect balance of, they obviously knew that they were going to be Siblers, but they didn't say like a complete fuck you to the Siblers. They're like, all right, like we know what you're doing. Like we're going to have to make you wait. And then in terms of a marketing tactic, like the Milady, Remilio, Schizo posters are definitely more of an on-chain native DeFi-esque crowd, builder like technical crowd compared to other NFT communities. So they knew exactly what they were doing. So from a marketing standpoint, and I'm biased because I have Schizo posters and Remilios, they knew exactly what they were doing. And when I found out that for just holding an NFT that I'm getting tokens, like it was like almost the same feeling as Uniswap, because I wasn't expecting it. But it makes sense, especially from like, if you think about like standard, like old marketing demographic practices, like, male, like in the certain age range from this area, like you can like judge like demographics in certain type of people, like based on like these certain stats. It's like the same thing with NFT holders. And they were basically doing the same thing, but using NFTs as the identifying tool of it. So I think like all around, like in terms of like points program, execution, how they distributed it, I think they did a great job. And I believe they're having another airdrop in the future. So there's like another season 2, quote unquote. So I think they've done a good job.
Which I think like that has to be the new meta. Like the one and done thing, it just doesn't make sense for anyone really. So yeah. And like, as far as what you said about kind of like classifying people with like the NFTs they hold and stuff, could not agree more. And like kind of going back to Wossy, that's like a big strength of ours, is like really the people who enjoy and like are a part of our community are some really like long-standing and trustworthy people, and it makes a difference for sure.
It does. It really does make a difference, and I wouldn't be surprised if Wossies get airdrops in the future.
I'm definitely pushing for it as much as I can.
Yeah. Next one. Actually, I'm going to say Blur, because Blur, I didn't have this on the list, but it really started the points meta, and they have these different seasons. I guess we're seeing a trend here, so I think you would probably think Blur is a good one. Yeah,
you're right. Yeah, I mean, because like they also innovated too.
They innovated,
Like, they innovated really well. Blur's a banger, dude. I think it's got to be a 9 or a 10.
9 or a 10.
Yeah, and then like I think everybody was so mad, like, oh my gosh, my NFTs are down. I think that's just like people being mad. I literally think they pretty much nailed it.
I don't
even know why they'd be a 9 out of 10, really.
Yeah, it's interesting because when they came into the market, I think OpenSea was 70 or 80% of the market share, and OpenSea refused to be crypto native. They were like, "Oh, we're not dropping a token. They stopped innovating. They basically got too comfortable too fast." And then Blur came in saying like, "We recognize the market as it is. Like, we're going to make this a trade, like NFT traders paradise, and we're going to incentivize trading activity." And that's all they did. And because they did that, I think they kind of like speed run a lot of cycles. And you hear a lot of Bored Apes complain like, "Oh, Blur ruined Bored Apes, blah, blah, blah." But Bored Apes, like they were destined to their fate. If anything, Blur got it to there sooner.
Yeah, it didn't change the supply and demand. I hate to.
No.
But I mean, I guess
it's going down. Yeah.
Yeah, one thing I would say is like, and kind of going back, I know we veered back towards crypto, but like it feels like OpenSea is kind of like the United States, and Blur is maybe some of these other newer, like more tech friendly countries, where like here nowadays, yesterday the SEC sued Robinhood. I mean, they're suing legitimate companies like every day. And so sorry, but going back to like the dollar, all that stuff, am I a doomer? No, I'm not a doomer. but the incentives are messed up here, and we're driving away people that are going to push that GDP number up, that are going to push it up a lot because they're building these tech companies that are, like wildly productive. So I had to just like throw that in. Like the OpenSea thing to me, like there's a line to be drawn.
Yeah, no, for sure. Like one way it's like the old way of doing things, and the other is the new pushing the boundaries way. And we see what happens. Like eventually, like everything moves towards efficiency, and that's what happened with Blur to OpenSea. Like it's just easier
100%.
to use.
People go where they're valued. Yeah.
Yeah. Next one, Friend, which happened quite recently. What are your thoughts on the Friend airdrop?
So biased on this one, for sure. Won't go into it, but I think it was interesting. I mean, one, it was like a liquidity vacuum because nothing was going on. I mean, there could have been like a fly on the wall, and all of CT would have been like enamored by it. But that being said, it was like it was also really, really cool. And like there's a lot to friend tech that I think is like pretty cool. I think when we're looking at it like from an airdrop perspective, it's gonna be really interesting because, and I'll kind of just not let it fly, but I'll just kind of say what I think here. It's like, okay, Paradigm is a self-interested entity, as you and I are, as every fund is, whatever. They've given away like, 100% of the tokens. So clearly like the revenue and all this stuff is their play. They've made a lot of that so far. So I think like the token is really going to take some time to like see if it has longevity or not, because as far as I understand it, I'm not the most up to date, but it's like you lock it up to use more like in-app stuff. So like there's a demand driver and a use, but I think it all just kind of comes down to like, okay, like is the inflow going to outpace the outflow on this app? Because in the end, there's like a level of speculation. And so, from an airdrop perspective, and this one's a bit rambly, sorry, but it's like, okay, did they do a good enough job designing these incentives to let it like, flap its wings and fly? Otherwise, it's going to kind of flop. So, they're doing the one and done, I think, as far as I can tell on the airdrop, it seems like. And like, they've designed some cool incentives. We'll just like,
we'll have to see. Yeah.
Yeah. That one's just really, it's unique for me for sure.
Yeah, no, for sure. There was a ton of hype before on it, and people were speculating on the value of the points and all that. And then it came out, and it's interesting to see the dynamic of, they gave away 100% of the token, but we, as users, we trade like getting 100% of the supply collectively and pay high fees instead. So it's interesting to see that dynamic. I wonder if people will prefer that. I think right now they do, but like we'll see how this adjusts over time.
Yeah, and then like will people continue to pay those fees without the token incentive? I don't know.
Yeah, yeah. We'll talk about vampire tax.
Yeah, so like it's just one of those things that like it's kind of a 0 to 1, and that's being very gracious, I think, like calling it a 0 to 1. I don't think there's like any Elon Musk level innovation, but it's a new idea. It was executed, I think, like well in spurts. And then I kind of just wasn't a fan of ways it was executed other than that. I think that there's like a decent bit of founder risk. And I'm, again, I have a personal bias, not trying to use it too strong there. But I think like you can kind of say that safely when you look at like the zero info on the tokens and all that stuff. So that one's just really tough is what I would say.
Yeah, fair. Now, last one. Eigen, which was announced. What are your thoughts on the Eigen airdrop?
I watched. Did you see the video? It's that long form meme video where people put the words over the guys talking in Spanish. You know?
Oh yeah.
And he's laughing, bro. I watched the Eigen layer one 10 times. I swear, and it's like 3 minutes long. So that's like a half hour of my life of me just belly laughing. So I think Eigen. It seems to me like they kind of screwed up. Like one, and again, not intimately familiar on this one because I kind of just always held the idea that EVM type farming, especially like, stake it like large liquidity based, that's not my game. I'm not a ETH whale. But I think like one thing they kind of screwed up on is that it seems like everybody went through, what was it, like Pendle or something, and then they really cut people who took that route.
Oh no, I think with Pendle they basically fucked up their announcement, and those, from what I understand, like those people will be rewarded in the future, but like right now they weren't. Like I feel like when they were constructing the airdrop, they didn't take into account how much Pendle was going to be used, and so for their like quote unquote season 2, they'll take them into account. I think they just did a terrible job at communicating.
Yeah, interesting. So I mean, like overall, just like not really a huge opinion. They obviously ruffled some feathers. Like, I don't know. Hopefully they can come back from it. The non-transferable thing, I think, is like, that's just a little bit disingenuous. It's kind of just to game the vesting, I think. So you got to knock some points off there. So what? Maybe a 6, 7? I don't know.
Yeah, no, I would give it lower. I would give it probably like a 3, 4. Honestly, probably 3. Especially with the geo blocking, like the thing that really ruffled me. I
forgot.
Oh yeah,
I had nothing in this too. So like if I had locked up a bunch of ETH, I'd probably be giving it a 1. But
no, I think I didn't really have too much in it because, like, for me, the Eigen layer is kind of heralded up as like, oh, this is what's gonna like drive ETH and like save ETH this market, like blah blah blah. And the expectations were so high, and it's been interesting seeing in like a whole meta sprout out because of Eigen layer. You have all like the liquid resticking tokens, which seems to come out of nowhere, and whatnot. And so there were like the expectations were high, and I think like ETH is such like a whale heavy chain that it's, for the average user, it's hard to play in that kind of environment. And so if you're not an ETH whale, if you don't have a lot of ETH, it's really is tough. So like that's like one turn off to it. And also like the expectations were just so high. But like the thing that ruffled me the wrong way, like I was saying, was they didn't geo block people depositing, which like juiced their numbers and like helped them raise their round and their latest round and all that. But when it came time for the airdrop and to announce the airdrop, they geo-blocked almost half the world. They geo-blocked Canada, of all places. They geo-blocked half of Africa, Asia, the US, of course, the other usual suspects. And I think, and then not only that, but they blocked VPN. And so they made it like, that kind of just, you're kind of like screwing over the people that help you get to your spot in the first place. And that just kind of rubbed me the wrong way. I mean, granted, you can make the argument that they're trying to be like super conservative legally and regulatory wise, but part of me just doesn't really buy that as much. I was like, how can like other tokens like come out and like do airdrops all around the world, even include the US, but you release a 44-page white paper, and then, which I think is actually pretty cool. I think the token's cool, but like the airdrop itself with the geo blocking, that just like ruffled me the wrong way.
No, I think that's 100% right. Like it's just not like fair. And I think like without going into it, you see a lot of like similar kind of BS. But no, I mean, that's just to me and like kind of a clear act of bad faith. Like you said, they profited off of that TVL. So I don't know. I mean, in the end, I think like people need to just probably demand more info. Will we end up doing that? Probably not. We'll just throw our
our money around.
Yeah, that's kind of just what we do, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. One airdrop that hasn't been announced yet, but but it's coming eminently is Layer 0. And what's interesting about them is they have this Siblers snitch program, like report other Siblers, and it's actually quite interesting game theory. Like, are people gonna really snitch each other? Like, is the reward enough? What are your thoughts on Layer 0's program to catch Siblers and prevent Siblers? Because I hear like one side of the argument is like, yes, like we want to like think of ways to like prevent sibling and people that are just not high value to your protocol. But on the other hand, it's what we were saying with Eigen layer. It's like these people brought value to your protocol. You're able to juice your TVL numbers to your protocol. And now you're coming in with this new information that's just like, it just kind of rubs me the wrong way as well.
Yeah, I think I'm more sympathetic to this one because like while they did bring value, they brought it like with an expectation of profiting. And so like It's a little tough. I think like for this, it's all going to come down to how they enforce it. Like I think in principle, it's cool. Like should some, mega industrial civil get paid? No. Like honestly, I think at that point, the self snitch for 15% is probably a great move. So no, like I'm for it in theory, but it's going to be really, really dependent on how they enforce it. Really, really dependent because, if you start catching up power users in it who have a couple different wallets, it's a slippery slope. So that one's just TBD, and it's like,
they're making it more complicated for themselves. Like I'm sure they're going to make a mistake. There's no way they do this 100% right. And so they'll probably have to have an arbitration process of like, hey, I'm actually a power user, like this and that. Or like, hey, like I just actually like used it because I actually needed to use it. So it'll be interesting to see how they go about their arbitration process. But it's, we're all trying to figure this out. We're all like kind of new to this. Like, how do you I'm sure we'll get like better at like doing this over time. And I think identity will play a role in it.
Yeah, I think it was Jupiter did a pretty good job. Like they had, and I could be wrong on, it was one of the Solana ones recently, but they had some civil protections and then they had like a couple week period where you could just like submit a ticket. And I actually had a friend who was using like some mid-sized centralized exchange service, which had been flagged as like, the hub of a Sybil thing. And he pretty easily like reported it. And then, they marked him clear as well as all the other wallets that got hit. So I think like if done correctly, when somebody says, hey, I was falsely marked, theoretically, you should find a lot of people who are falsely marked. And like, I think it could be done right. But like you said, they're adding a lot of complexity. They're adding a lot of work. And like, as we all know, the tolerance in crypto, like people get mad quick.
It's very low.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, for sure. But no, that's the end of the airdrop segment. Now I just want to get into Wossies and what's going on.
One more thing.
Yeah, go ahead.
Really quick on the airdrop thing. I just wanted to mention this because I think there's like a little bit of alpha in there regarding airdrops. One thing I've noticed in like Eigen, I think was like a little bit of an example, but like Camino was, and I think there will be more in the future, is that use the little tools that like fewer people are using because it's going to be a lot easier to get like a meaningful airdrop from that. My point is 95% of the people on Camino use the lend and the borrow thing. Okay, cool. The long and the short tool on season 1 paid out way more because nobody's using it. Like maybe the liquidity mining, whatever. So my point is if there's a protocol you're using, you want to get the airdrop, try and use some of the smaller features because I think it's pretty common that those per, dollar spent or whatever are going to give you a higher return because the whales are just less involved and blah, blah, blah.
Yeah, in a way that kind of weeds out people that are doing the lowest amount of work. But if you use the more exotic tools that take a bit more effort, you're more likely to get rewarded.
100%. Yeah. In fact, like I looked at some data and specifically using the long short tool on Camino versus basically doing the same thing, but in their lending market, I think the difference was like 400% or 500% in tokens. As far as like the way it was weighted, come airdrop. So the point being is like try to not be with like the bulk of the people.
Yeah, separate yourself from the pack.
100%.
Yeah. And now on to Wossies. For those unfamiliar, like maybe this is the first time listening to this podcast, so hearing about Wossies, what are Wossies? What are the Wossieverse NFTs? And what is the latest going on with them?
So Wossies are just CT's like native little beloved character. And like kind of what are Wossies is the whole joke because nobody really knows, but it's something like, we created as a community led by Maru and Inversebra. And I'd say like Wossies just kind of stand for like fun and like helping people and decentralization like in general. And so like the way that we run Wossieverse, the project, which is, a project that I run kind of like I'm in the CEO type role. Smolting is obviously the visionary, him and Maru. We have artists, we have a bunch of people on the team. But the whole goal of Wossieverse is one, make the world a better place. And, like we do that just by like trying to help people while we can. And then two is just keeping the culture alive in a sustainable way. So like as the CEO, I basically run the project as like, all right, we need to be making enough money to like keep it growing, keep it sustainable. But really the whole goal is make the world a better place. So like we're about to come out with this really cool project. I don't know when this podcast will drop. I don't know when we'll finish this, but it's like purely for charity.
It's a drop in 2 days.
Okay, cool. Yeah, so the project won't be done yet, but it's like a purely for charity thing, partnered with like a really cool organization. So stuff like that is like what fuels us as a group. But Wossies are just like, they're symbolic of crypto. They're symbolic of us all sticking together for good, I think. And like, you know, what is Wossieverse and like what will it look like and what's new? It's actually a really interesting question because I think we're doing things pretty different from most people. So like we have these 3D characters, you know, they're very well done. They're all fully rigged. And we have our one collection on Solana. But like what we'll do is go to great protocols throughout the crypto ecosystem. We just moved to Solana, so obviously we're looking at Solana now. So we'll go there, we'll say, hey, you know, X protocol or whatever protocol we're talking to, let's go and let's make like a custom Wossie branded with you guys. Let's make a bunch of great video, photo content. And basically, they're going to get better engagement on their announcements and stuff because people love Wossies. You know, for us, the Wossie culture grows, and we're able to just create like symbiotic situations.
Create a flywheel.
Like this. Exactly. No, exactly. And so like, yeah, no, but literally perfectly put. So, but that's like my plan is like, what do we have? We have like incredible lore. We have an incredible community. We have wonderful artists. And so it's all about kind of just like partnering up, finding these synchronicities. And what Wossie really like aims to be is just like a hub of great content, you know, legitimate like protocols that people should get involved with, and just like love in crypto. And I think that was all very rambly, and it's probably a little early for it to make perfect sense.
It's crypto and CT's wholesome mark is Wossies.
Amen. Yeah.
Yeah.
TLDR right there.
TLDR right there. Where can people learn more about Wossies and, you know, join the Wossie community?
So Wossieverse.io is our website, and we're actually redoing that now, so that'll be done soon. But twitter.com/Wossie. Or twitter.com/Wossieverse. For whatever reason, Twitter just hates our original Wossieverse handle. The algo will never like do much with it. So Wossie is the one we kind of use mostly, but you know, we use them both. So I would say Twitter or Discord is the best to like stay up to date. And we've definitely got some cool stuff cooking. Like the whole goal for me, or the way I'm kind of looking at it, and let me rewind, not the whole goal, but a part of the goal is to leverage like our community with promising tech. So what we want to do is find promising tech, bring our community, and like partner with those people who have built that tech to make everybody like benefit and better off from it, if that makes sense.
No, it does for sure. It's like everybody, it's PVE. Wossies are PVE. Everybody grows together.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Now, one last question. You were on a year ago. I expect you to be on a year from now. And when you are on, what are those year from now predictions? Like, how do you think the next 12 months will go?
Interesting. Okay, let me think. I think like one pretty easy one is we're going to continue to see on-chain volumes grow. I think like that's, I think and I hope that is like a staying trend and a staying factor. I think memes continue to have their place. It'll be like seasonal, we'll see, but I think those are here to stay. What are some other predictions? I think that, I mean, it's not a fun prediction. I think regulatory is going to continue to be pretty tough, really, until Gensler is probably gone. I think that's like a real headwind. Not something that's going to stop us as an industry. It never has, but I think it's just something to be aware of. And then I think we're just going to continue to see institutional adoption. I have like quite a few connects in like the institutional world, and like their interest is really at all-time highs. And so like I think the Bitcoin ETF was really the floodgates, and we're going to see continued kind of interest from them in what we've got going on.
Yeah, the BTC ETF is like their first taste. And then as they go down the risk curve, as inevitably happens, they'll be like, oh, Ethereum, oh, DeFi. We'll see if they get to meme coins. Probably not. Maybe they do. Who knows?
That would be, if we ever get the Doge ETF, that would be incredible. But yeah, I think like,
I think that's definitely possible.
It's definitely, no, it is. And like classic Elon, like, what does he say? Like the funniest outcome is the most likely one or whatever.
Yeah.
This would be such a prime example.
Yeah.
But no, I guess my year prediction is like overall bullish. I think that like, there's going to be capital seeking the best ETH competitor, or like, I think that, okay, sorry, let me rephrase this. Bitcoin has like no competitor. And so like Wall Street has bought Bitcoin. Bitcoin is just kind of out there on its own. I think that like, as they go down this risk curve, we're going to see a lot of like large funds trying to get exposure to like the next L1 smart contract platform. And that is going to be really exciting for traders and everyone, I think.
A tale as old as time. We need another L1.
Yeah.
Just one more.
And then an L2 and an L3, actually. Yeah.
Yeah. For sure. Like everybody just wants to own their own real estate. But yeah, anyways, Monkey, thanks so much for coming on. Where can people find you?
Twitter.com/monkeycharts is best place to find me.
Yeah. Thanks again for coming, Monkey. Go follow him. Go follow Wossieverse. Join Wossieverse. And Monkey, hope to see you again soon.
Appreciate you, brother. We'll see you next year.
Thanks. Everything said on this episode is not financial or tax advice. This channel is strictly for educational purposes and is not an investment advice or solicitation to buy or sell any assets or to make any financial decisions. This video is not tax advice whatsoever. Please talk to your accountant and do your own research.